Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Coaching the Bible. This is episode 204, season 4, episode 44. Hope you're doing well. Hope you had a good week. Hope you're going to have a great weekend ahead. Our topic of the week on not always getting what you want. Super important topic in this portion. It's something I've explored in my own research and study, but not something I've discussed out loud, but it's been something that's been on my mind as an idea, as a thought, and I'm glad I got the chance to discuss it with you this week. So, win of the week. There were a lot actually this week, just because in our family, this week has always been sort of a big week in terms of just on the Hebrew calendar kind of a thing, or the English calendar too, actually. A bunch of different things. First and foremost, the 17th of August is our wedding anniversary. So this is 24 years. Which is quite an amazing accomplishment, 24 years. Although when we think about it, 25, I guess, is a bigger number, but it's also the one that people remember more. So we'll celebrate maybe in a bigger way at 25. 24 is a big deal, so happy anniversary to you, Naomi. And congratulations to us on getting to this point. This week also was the 10th anniversary of our moving to Israel. Our aliyah-versary is the term. Aliyah is the term in Hebrew for a person who moves to Israel. And so it's been 10 years, a decade here, and now officially we have lived here longer than we have lived as a family anywhere else, which is a big deal. And as I mentioned a couple of times over the last number of weeks, just sort of how I'm processing and how I'm thinking about it, it's quite an accomplishment and something that we are, I think, incredibly proud of for our family and just for how it sort of seems to have worked out for everyone just so far. So amazing stuff. And then the last thing, just has a lot of other things. Had the opportunity to ascend the Temple Mount this week on the fast day, which was exceptionally powerful as an experience, and maybe I'll get to it another time to discuss it in greater detail. And 36 years ago this week, had the opportunity to celebrate my bar mitzvah here in Israel with my family. Wasn't the actual bar mitzvah that took place earlier in the calendar in June, but we had the chance to be here for the summer and celebrate that experience as well. So just a lot on the calendar around this time, and so it's a very meaningful, very powerful week, and I'm glad I got to share those wins with you. Learning of the week here this week is twofold. One, after the fast is over, I have the opportunity to shave off a beard that has grown over the course of 3 weeks of mourning, and my beard ages me by a lot of years, and I'm glad to be rid of it. I know family members are as well. Glad that I am rid of it. But more importantly, this week I got new glasses, and you don't appreciate how poorly you see things until you have a clearer line of sight. And so the old glasses I had, I knew were sort of fading, and they were scratched, and that they were a little bit not great in terms of the lenses. It's been years, but you don't appreciate it until you put that new pair of glasses on, and now you see everything in like incredible crystal clear, LD, HD, whatever version of it. And it's an important sort of appreciation that you can't always sort of get stuck in the way you see things and the way things are, because perhaps you simply have it wrong, and it's important to begin to start to see things more clearly. Okay, so that's all that other stuff. Our topic again of the week is on not always getting what you want. If you have the quote from the Rolling Stones ripping through your mind right now, that's great. The quote from the Rolling Stones is, "You can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you'll find you get what you need." And so I wanted to dive into this topic because I think it's a really important piece of the puzzle when we think about the opening portion of this week. The opening portion of this week is Moses not being allowed again to enter into the land. He's already been punished. We've learned about the punishment, talked a little bit about the punishment last week in terms of cause and effect. But in the space of appreciating what happens, Moses opens the portion of the week by talking about the fact that he prayed to God many times. And he asked God, and he beseeched God, and he begged God through his prayers to even not forgive him, but simply to allow him to enter the land of Israel. if you look at some of the commentaries that go further on the matter and explain what Moses is saying, one of the commentaries actually says that Moses is saying, look, I'll make a deal. I'm not going to go in as the leader. That's fine. I just want to go in. So allow me to retire, become leader of the people of Israel emeritus, and allow me to go into the land to experience what that would be. And God says no. The Midrashic literature goes further, and Moses says, you know what? Okay, how about this? Turn me into a bird, and allow me to go and enter the land as a bird, and not as a human, but allow me the opportunity to fly into the land and fly over the land and maybe land on the land and be in the land in that capacity. And God says no. I actually had that experience a little bit this week when I was on the Temple Mount. There was this bird that was sort of hovering around, and I thought to myself, this is like the holiest place on earth, and here's this bird, and the rabbi and me had a moment thinking like, oh, this is sort of what Moses was hoping for, which is to be here, to have the opportunity simply just to be on the ground. And it's disappointment after disappointment for Moses. It's simply not going to happen. And first, sort of as an aside, it's a power lesson in, let's say, prioritization, in appreciating what the goal perhaps always was, and thinking about that and wanting more as a person. And I think about it a lot, especially with the opportunity to live here for so many years at this point, about how important this was to Moses. And taking stock in appreciating how important this was to him and sharing that out loud with everybody else and considering the gift that it is to have the land, to be able to live in the land, to be able to raise your family in the land, to sort of live as you're supposed to in the land of Israel as a member of the people of Israel. And that this is sort of high priority level 1 version of existence, and that we lose priority on that a lot, and it's unfortunate. I remember I'm not sure if it my bar mitzvah or my older brother, where I think it was my father, it might have been the rabbi. I have that image confused a little bit. I mean, maybe he'll appreciate that, my dad, that he now has smicha. Somebody spoke about the idea of standing on giant shoulders, about having the opportunity to be in the land and live in the land when those people did not, when Moses did not get the chance to step foot into the land. And that's my digression for just a minute here, but it's super important to sort of appreciate how that is. But let's also now dive into this topic of not always getting what you want. How do you lead when you don't always get what you want? So it's really important, first and foremost, to appreciate that being disappointed is a feature, not a bug. There are always going to be moments of disappointment in life. You're not always going to get what it is that you want in life. Dalai Lama had actually said that it might be a stroke of luck not getting always the things that you want. Remember that sometimes not getting what you want is a wonderful stroke of luck. That was the quote from the Dalai Lama. I think it's an important quote and worth sharing right here. And so it's appreciation that it's not an if, it's a when. And so to build into the system of our being that it's not if, it's going to be when. It's a feature, not a bug. And so let's explore this a little bit further. We're not going to do the traditional sort of approach. We'll get through all the psychology of it. We're going to learn some lessons here from Moses as it relates to this and how we can maybe perhaps apply it to our own leadership situation. So number one, so we have to appreciate there are limits to the leadership opportunities that are presented to us, and that those limits in life will always leave something unfulfilled. The person who says they live with no regrets perhaps hasn't dreamt big enough. And so you have some things that you simply don't reach. And even the most accomplished leaders have limits, like Moses. And so as Winston Churchill is famously quoted as saying, success is not final, failure is not fatal, it is the courage to continue that counts. Moses shows us that leadership isn't just about achieving every goal, it's about having the courage to continue to lead even when those goals are out of reach. Leadership involves recognizing and accepting limitations. Famously, of course, from the real world, remember Steve Jobs was the CEO of Apple twice, after having founded the company and led the company originally, having been ousted from the company itself, and then coming back to lead it to even greater heights later on. There are limits at certain moments, and then maybe you have the opportunity to exceed those limits at another point, but it's not a guarantee that that's the case. And so as a result, when we're building our leadership set, we want to always build in the idea that there are limits. There are going to be setbacks. We have to perhaps reframe those setbacks properly and appropriately, maybe have counsel come in and help us out in appreciating how those setbacks make sense. But it's also important to have pivot leadership strategies in place for when those limits hit. And so you're prepared for those moments as they come. So the first thing is appreciating here from Moses that there are always going to be some sort of unfulfilled dream or unfulfilled desire that's out there, and that's okay, and that's part of the system. Number two is accepting that there are decisions that are going to be made that are beyond your personal control. Moses didn't have to just face his own limitations. He had to accept that there is a decision maker bigger, more powerful than he, that will and can make decisions that go against Moses' deepest desires. He can pray all he wants, he can beg, he can beseech, all kinds of things, and God can still say no. It's an important thing. You can be the President of the United States and have a desire to run for office again, and apparently there are people who have greater power than you who can tell you no. My political statement for the week. But that's sort of that power, and you have to appreciate that that exists, and that's humbling. That's hard for a leader, a powerful person, to appreciate that that's the case. If you're in an organization, so you have a board of directors. If you're an employee, you have a boss. Whatever the case may be, there are certain decisions that are going to be outside of your control. There's something called the Serenity Prayer, which I read about earlier in preparing, that is used in AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and a lot of other places. I think it originated, what I read, was in some environment in the YMCA environment, but it really by someone by the name of Reinhold Niebuhr, which a little bit goes like this. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. We have to appreciate that there's humility in that. Being denied something that's out of your control, even when you make the request, even when it's something that you want, even when you think you're right, is exceptionally powerful. And so you have to have what we'll call the decision acceptance process. I don't know that this is a real thing, but in the course of preparing for this, and as I always said, ChatGPT helping me put frameworks around some of these ideas, the decision acceptance process is acknowledge, reflect, reframe, act. Acknowledge, recognize the decision and its impact, reflect, understand your emotional response and the implications of the decision, reframe, shift your perspective to see the potential opportunities or the positive outcomes, and act. Determine the best course of action moving forward within the new parameters. That's a very powerful process and framework that you can implement, which allows you to be sort of injured and diminished less when something like that happens to you, when the decision doesn't go your way, and sort of think about how you want to operate now. You can wallow in it, but perhaps you want to go beyond that. Number three is that the role is important to appreciate here, the role of legacy in leadership. John Maxwell is quoted as saying, I think we mentioned this quote before, a leader's lasting value is measured by succession. And so Moses not just leading for 40 years, but putting the people in a position to go further and setting up a legacy for the people into the future and faithfully transmitting that legacy to them so that they can build it now over 3,000 years later is an incredibly powerful legacy. And so appreciating that the moment is important, but the legacy is everything. And so keeping that in mind is very, very powerful. So if you think about also other leaders in the course of history who've had legacies that have outlasted their own time on earth, it's not a lot of people that fit into that category. So you have to appreciate, maybe Gandhi is one of those examples, right? His whole approach to Nonviolent resistance continues to be a source of inspiration for people around the world. And so we have to sort of think about that also. Legacy leadership, when we're thinking about decision making, we're thinking about leading a certain way, we perhaps want to always put on a lens, there's that glasses reference for this week, put on a lens that has sort of a long-term impact lens on our thinking and how we go about this. And so it allows us to sort of widen the view, the aperture of the eye, so we can see more and allow ourselves to think bigger than just the immediate moment and sort of play long-term strategy. I'm playing a long game as opposed to the short game. By virtue of doing that, you can reevaluate the impact of a missed opportunity in the short term for the long-term gain that may go out there ultimately. As it relates then to legacy is also succession. If Moses doesn't put a successor in place, if God doesn't appoint Joshua as that person, it makes it exceptionally difficult. They always say that when they talked about Walmart, the great things that Sam Walton did was that he didn't just lead the company, he built succession into the company so the company could go forward. It's something we talked about early on in Coaching the Bible, is the concept of succession, preparing for succession, putting succession into play and into place so that you can perpetuate into the future, that you can have a longer range and a longer term impact. There's a quote from Ralph Nader, who I don't, I think, ever quote, but he's worth quoting here. The function of leadership is to produce more leaders, not more followers. I think Rabbi Sachs has a similar statement like that, and I think he attributes it and connects it to the Lubavitcher Rebbe in that space as well. And so it's an important sort of appreciation here is to establish succession. Putting structured succession planning into play. It's not simple, it's not easy, but very powerful and very important, and will save you a lot of money and a lot of angst and a lot of issues in the long term, in the long run. Next, I want to add here is something about the role of prayer and reflection. It's important to appreciate here that Moses prays for the opportunity to go into the land. He's denied that. If I had to think about how this would play out, if this is the Hollywood version of this story, Moses would have been punished. It would have been told that he's not going in. It would have become publicly clear to everybody that Moses wasn't going into the land. He wasn't going to have the opportunity to complete the task, as it were, of taking the people out of Egypt, through the desert, to Sinai, all the way into the land of Israel itself. The Hollywood version of it would be at some moment, maybe the Disney version, or at least the old Disney version, would have had the moment at the end where there's a reprieve and God allows it to happen. And it's not to be. But it's important to appreciate that prayer is a factor in this. You might not be a religious person if you're listening here, but it's worth considering how that plays a role, what prayer might mean for you and how prayer plays a role, whatever your faith may be. But where does it fit in? There's a great quote from Gandhi, actually, which is this: prayer is not asking. It is a longing of the soul. It is daily admission of one's weakness. And so in this space, it's important to have the time to pray, the time to reflect, the time to take stock in that space. Again, however you do that. There's a great story actually told about Abraham Lincoln, that in the course of the Civil War, around the time of the Battle of Gettysburg, it is told as follows, that he went to his room one day and locked the door, got down on his knees before God and prayed for victory at Gettysburg. He's quoted as saying, "I said to him that this was his war and our cause, his cause, but we couldn't stand another Fredericksburg or Chancellorsville." Lincoln included prayer. It's an important sort of appreciation when you have leadership who does acknowledge a power greater than they in the course of the work that they're doing. I don't want anyone to sort of have this notion that they're all powerful and that there's nothing above them. And so prayer, very much, I think, real or true penitent prayer, but true prayer nonetheless, allows the person to have that deep reflective moment, allows the opportunity for the person to, quote unquote, share it out loud, but also to appreciate that they can also lay it a little bit at the feet of their God or their faith, and again, whatever it is that they believe in. And so I want to share just one last idea here. I know I'm sort of running late on time here. Is there something that's this, which is the power of unfulfilled dreams. It is great if it is the case that a person has fulfilled all their dreams. I don't think that's necessarily the case for most people, let alone the case that perhaps I would want for anyone necessarily to have fulfilled every single one of the dreams in life. But there's an opportunity that in the power of the unfulfilled dream, which is this, it's to inspire people to pick up that dream, to carry that dream, and to take that dream all the way to the end zone, to finish the story on behalf of and for the person or the people that began the dream. We talked about this once before also. Abraham started the faith, and he's the one who's promised the idea of his people settling in that land. He doesn't live to see it. Moses picks up the mantle and moves it a certain distance, but he doesn't finish the job. And so it's an appreciation that unfulfilled dream, that inspiring unfulfilled dream, has the opportunity to take people further and to push people further. If you want to put it in a contemporary lens, that's sort of the MLK, Martin Luther King Jr. piece, which he talks about, I have a dream one day that the nation will rise up, and so on and so forth. He didn't live to see that dream. He didn't get there. But it did allow people to pick up that dream when it is inspiring, when it is moving, when it is something that draws on the soul and the spirit of humanity. It can be something that people can pick up and take on. People can pick up your vision and they can step into the space, almost as it were, to step into the shoes and take it forward. There's that vision continuity of handing the baton, if you want to use an Olympic reference for a relay race, which just took place over the last couple of weeks, handing the vision baton to the next person so they can have what you call vision continuity, and then they can sort of cast their role and their personality and their image and their impact on that vision, as it were. And so really important to sort of appreciate how this all works. And I think it's really important to appreciate as a leader, again, the notion that it's not a if, but a when the disappointment comes, when sort of the tragedy might strike, when you're not going to get what it is always that you want, and that's okay. And that's part of the way it goes. Imagine if you always got what you want, how boring that might be. But the opportunity here is to appreciate how that is, and then for the person itself as a leader to really set up the opportunity to have regular reflection sessions on the disappointments, on the failures, on the things that didn't work, on the things that didn't go right for themselves and for the team, to map out perhaps legacy visioning, to perhaps map out that vision continuity idea as you pass it on into the future. Really important to sort of have all these things in place all at the same time and be able to appropriately set oneself up for the possibility and the likelihood of some sort of disappointment, but also perhaps to think about the reality that sometimes the things that you want aren't actually the things that you need, and that the things that you thought you needed, the things that you dreamed about, actually wouldn't serve you in any way. That's not necessarily the case with Moses, but it might be the case with you. And think about all the opportunities that came your way that you didn't get, that perhaps the best thing that happened to you is the thing that didn't happen to you, the jobs you didn't get, the houses you didn't buy, the communities you didn't move to, the people you didn't end up marrying, living with, being with, the friends who left you because ultimately that was better for you, even though at the moment you didn't realize that that was the case. And so appreciating sometimes the things that don't happen to you, the things that you don't get, are actually what you need. And so finish it out with a quote. I don't know that this quote actually has an author, but it is anonymous for the moment. Sometimes life doesn't give you what you want, not because you don't deserve it, but because you deserve more. That is Coaching the Bible for this week. Look forward to seeing you next week. I hope you have a great weekend and a great week ahead.